Hi, my name is Dirk Kammerle, and today I will be giving a presentation on new technology such as the internet, smartphones, and particularly gaming, and how it's affecting us as a society and also some of the I'm going to start off by speaking on technology psychology or media psychology, then move on to social networking and internet connectivity, human connectivity, and how all of that has changed as a result of new technology. And then gaming and cognition. And throughout all of this, I'll be talking about some of the implications that we've seen of the growth in technology. Just to start off, technology is the basis of a society, and it affects all civilizations, that is past, present, and future. Technology is like Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And media psychology has become particularly relevant today, and it was created as a direct response to the explosion of new media since the 50s, and that includes, but is not limited to, the psychological study of media such as the internet, smartphones, television, gaming, radio, and so on. But about how it's transformed our society, increased productivity and opportunity, how it's overcome the constraints of geography and changed the way we relate to media, as well as to each other. And the media revolution really leaves no industry, career, country, or process untouched. It affects everything. So it's a study of how human behavior, emotions, and cognition has changed with technology. As I mentioned, it includes all forms of mediated communication. It's a field that continually changes in response to emerging technologies. For instance, 10 years ago, we didn't have Wi-Fi. Facebook was just coming along. Media psychology is in a unique position to understand how people interact with media at multiple levels. That includes as producers, as consumers, and with varied contexts and cultures. And it provides the tools to understand and promote media technology that allow people to thrive, communities to come together, and nations to communicate with one another. In this graph here, I want to highlight the importance of technology in terms of our workforce, because it really has reshaped our society. And this graph here shows that up until the 1950s, the percent of agricultural workers and industrial workers made up a very significant portion of the workforce. But that's starting to change. Since the 50s, we've seen that information workers are outnumbering both agricultural and information workers. So in order to process the information that we're inundated with on a daily basis, for instance, there are estimates that we are subject to anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 media messages per day, and those come in various forms, such as through text messages, through email, through radio, television. We take in an enormous amount of information per second, and the estimates range from around 12 million bits per second onward. The average email has about 30 to 40 bits of information. And in order to deal with these enormous amounts of information, we take into all our senses, that's eyesight, hearing, and so on. We need some system to categorize that information, and frames are part of that system. And what frames are, they're mental structures that shape what we see, what we're persuaded by, how we persuade others. Frames also shape how we see other people, politicians, business people, friends, partners, and people we've just met. And gaming, for instance, is one example of this. A lot of us may have a very negative perception on gaming, particularly first-person shooting games. We've seen a lot of people criticizing them with the recent school shootings. And this capability that our brain has can also be very dangerous, as in the case of prejudices, stereotypes, oversimplification, etc. Often people think that they do not have negative frames or stereotypes, and we need to remember that we all do. Now, changing frames means to change our or others' view of the world, and that includes social, political, business, personal, or educational issues. Frames are automated and often subconscious. They are very powerful, and it is very important to know that we cannot simply negate an existing frame or argue against it, especially not using the same language that is being used for the undesirable frame that we want to change. And facts are not the answer. Frames literally filter what we hear, what we see in terms of facts. And even if the facts are true, if they don't fit somebody's frame, they cannot be ignored. For instance, if I have a very negative opinion about gaming, if I strongly believe that first-person shooting games are contributing to the number of school shootings, chances are that somebody's not going to change my mind if I'm very set in that opinion. And that would be because we're not rational human beings. In fact, we're quite irrational. And I have an example of this. Honda, several years ago, was one of the first auto companies to come out with a hybrid vehicle. And it was, from a technological standpoint, it was amazing. Engineering-wise, it was state-of-the-art, but it didn't sell well. Toyota, however, came out with the Prius. Now, the Prius looked different, it felt different. Granted, it had a wonderful marketing campaign associated with it, but it sold very well. And it sold well because it had the eco-conscious consumer in mind. They realized that the eco-conscious consumer doesn't necessarily act in an eco-friendly manner because it feels good to do so. They want others to see that they are eco-conscious. Now, the Prius, it looked different. It had the hybrid tag. Yes, the engineering was great, but so was the Honda. But it sold well because it gave eco-conscious consumers a way to communicate that they are eco-conscious to other people. And that is one theory as to why it sold so well. Now, society pushes us to invent and innovate new products every day. And we as a society demand more and better products all the time. And we need to think, do we stop and look at the effect this has on us as a society and as a nation? Do we stop and think about how technology is affecting us both positively and negatively every day? Or are we reactionary? Are we driven by fear, which we often are? Some examples of how we have been driven by fear in the past, or how individuals have been driven by fear. John Philip Sousa lobbied the White House to plead his case against the gramophone because he believed that it would cause vocal cords to shrivel, and he predicted that it would mean the end of people gathering to sing. Plato feared that people would forget how to use their memory if they can't write things down. While he may have a point there. Radio in the 30s, parents were warned that it would diminish children's performance in school, and that the compelling excitement of the loudspeaker would disturb the balance of excitable minds. And it was predicted that television would cause the vulgarization of American culture and destroy the emotional, intellectual capacities of a generation of children. CNN had a headline, "Email hurts IQ more than pot." The Telegraph had a headline, "Twitter and Facebook could harm moral values." The Daily Telegraph in the UK also had a headline titled, "Facebook and MySpace. Generation cannot form relationships." Well, there might be something to that. And the Daily Mail had a headline that stated, "How using Facebook could raise your risk of cancer." So let's take a look at some of the online trends that we've seen. The trends in terms of technology. So in 2000, about 46% of adults used the web, 5 had broadband at home, and 50% owned a cell phone. Fast forward to 2012, we're seeing that 94% of adults use the internet, 62% of broadband, 80% own a cell phone, and 53% are now connecting to the web wirelessly. That was technology that wasn't available in 2000. Seeing a generation gap. Younger people are more likely to be consumers of new technology than older generations. In fact, 40% of kids now use the internet to complete homework assignments. We're also seeing a gap in terms of racial demographics. 41% of blacks and Hispanics use a computer at home, and that compares to 77% of whites. And the socioeconomic differences are stark as well. 31% of students from families earning less than $20,000 use computers at home, compared to 89% of those from families earning more than $75,000. Text messaging. 3,400 text messages are exchanged monthly on average per teen, and those are individuals between 13 and 17. Teen girls are the highest consumers of text messages. They send and receive an average of 4,050 per month, followed by teen boys, who send an average of 2,500 texts each month. I'd like to point out here, and again we're focusing on gaming. We often think that younger individuals are the highest consumers of gaming. But here, as highlighted in this chart, we see that the millennials, and those are individuals between 18 and 34, about 63% own a game console, and that is the same for Generation Xers, and those are individuals between 35 and 46. Just some of the implications here. We're seeing that people are doing more reading and writing now, and that has to be better than the alternative because participation breeds engagement. Reading and writing will be different in 10 years. There will be a new fluidity in media creation, and screen literacy will become important, and this is going to be important when we speak on gaming. The nature of writing has changed now, especially since so much of it takes place in public. The quality of the new material will get better thanks to feedback. Information can be reached within a few clicks. Technology is breeding change from which we can learn from our mistakes. And learning, we need to learn as we go along. And just to go back on the reading and writing aspect, what we're beginning to see is, of course, we're going back to text messaging. We're seeing a rise in ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and we're also seeing in terms of writing skills that we're seeing shorter paragraphs, and there isn't as much fluidity within paragraphs. And gaming. So, game addiction has not yet officially been recognized as a disorder in the DSM, but studies have found that between 5 and 11% of children worldwide say that gaming is disrupting their lives, suggesting they could be considered addictive. Violent first-person shooter games have the most powerful neurological effects. In fact, playing a violent video game can briefly boost aggressiveness, and regular exposure could cause kids to be meaner to one another. And even though it's just a game, the body does dump stress hormones into the bloodstream that prepare the fight or flight response, and that can last up to 30 minutes. And regular exposure to violent video games account for about 1 to 4% of the many possible triggers for aggression. And other predictors range from provocation to poverty to child abuse, and protective factors are important here. Protective factors are involved parents and good social skills. Those are things that can minimize the problem. Gaming could have a large impact on milder forms of aggressiveness, and that's bullying and yelling and so forth. I think this is a good cartoon. On the top we see two kids looking at a headline, a newspaper headline, violent TV and games linked to aggression, and they're kind of making fun of the headline, and you see the result at the bottom. Okay, let's talk about gamers. Now, teaching is a critical word when it comes to gaming, and here's why. One of the most consequential conclusions of research that has been done in this area is that video games have a power that few other activities can claim. With practice, for instance, a violinist can play a Mozart string concerto beautifully, but that will not make him better in much else. He'll be great at playing the violin. Gamers, however, are different because gamers do not just learn to be good at shooting. In neurological terms, for instance, action games seem to retune connectivity across and within different areas of the brain. That means that gamers have the ability to learn. The ability to apply learning to broader tasks is called transfer. And it is the holy grail of education, and I'll be talking a little bit more about this. First-person shooting games can improve visual attention, particularly in terms of attention to locations in space. One study compared subjects playing the game Medal of Honor. That's a first-person shooter game set on a battlefield, and it compared that with non-gamers just playing Tetris, which I think we've all had, or all have. And each group played for about an hour a day for 10 days. Now, before and after the training, both groups took a visual attention test. Those who played Medal of Honor in the test that took place after, those who played Medal of Honor, improved significantly in visual and spatial attention. Those who played Tetris, however, showed zero improvements. Other improvements that were seen among gamers is improvements in sensory processing and visual acuity, and that refers to a person's ability to see detail. Contrast sensitivity, and that is the capacity to distinguish between different degrees of gray. Improved spatial reasoning, and that enables us to visualize how objects behave in three-dimensional space. Improved hand-eye coordination. And playing video games might even ameliorate certain visual disorders. For instance, lazy eye, blurred or otherwise poor vision in one eye disrupts neuronal circuits in the visual cortex during development, leaving one eye underdeveloped. And in children, doctors currently patch the dominant eye to strengthen the weaker eye. So playing video games can alleviate this visual disorder. It can help it. So doctors may not have to depend on something as simple as patching the dominant eye. So just to cap things up, a body of recent research shows that playing certain video games improves vision, attention, spatial reasoning, but also decision making. More than 90% of children play video games, but we have to remember that adults do too. In fact, the average gamer's age is 33. The games that have the most powerful neurological effects are the ones parents hate the most, and those are the first-person shooting games. Gamers are better at attention tasks such as visually tracking a friend as he or she moves through a crowd of people. And video game players excel at making quick decisions. For instance, when they drive, the skill helps them rapidly assess or react to flashes of light or movements near the vehicle. Is that a child about to run through the intersection? Well, if you're a gamer, you're going to be slightly quicker to react. And there was also a study done on laparoscopic surgeons, and that showed that the number one predictor of surgical skill was how well a doctor played video games. So if games improve eyesight and visual attention, researchers considered what other brain processes they might be able to tweak. And ideally, researchers would be able to tease out the beneficial ingredients of these games to create non-violent versions that train brains just as effectively. But so far, these factors seem to conclude operating from a first-person point of view, managing multiple streams of information and goals, and making rapid decisions. Technology is everywhere, and we need to accept it, and that includes games. It is a good trend for our society if we follow the ethics. And we need to be a master of technology, but don't let technology master you. And in addition, we cannot underestimate the importance of education about how gaming is affecting us, the importance of being good role models to our kids who play these games, as well as limiting the amount of time that kids spend online or playing video games. Structure. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And more to come. Thank you.